Welcome to the Three Dot Podcast, episode 22, a rare Sunday episode and another solo episode. We have some updates here to get to with the state of Three Dot. James, for those who have been following for the last couple episodes, has decided to take a step back from Three Dot. Now, he says it's because he has a lot going on. He doesn't want to be on the show and half-assing it, and kind of said he felt like he was the last two appearances he made, which I thought were good episodes. You know, I don't have a problem with him stepping back if that's what he feels he needs to do, but I thought he was doing a good job. So that is official now. Talked with him earlier this week, or last week now, and he said that he just has too much going on with work and other things where he wouldn't be able to give his all to the team. So I respect that, and this seat will always be open for him. Some of you I spoke to were aware that I was upset with Phil after last week's episode. Now, Phil himself, when he was here, did a great job, I thought. I thought it was a good episode. It was good to hear back from him. But then after the show, we had all been posting the links on Facebook. That's where a lot of our traffic's been coming from. And I tagged Phil, said, welcome back, posted the link. And I look at it about 20 minutes later. He had liked it right away, and I look at it 20 minutes later, and the tag's gone. It just says Phil. So I text him and say, did you remove yourself from the tag on the post? He says, yes, I'm trying to get in with this group at church, and we cuss too much, or we cuss on it. I don't want them to hear me cussing. So first of all, he hasn't been promoting the show for a while now, so it's to me it comes off as you're embarrassed of the show, which doesn't fly. You know, like, that's not something I can agree with or support at all. Now, with it being a church group or whatever, sure, but why not say something before the show? Hey, can we try not to cuss on this one since I'm on it? Or something like that. Or let me know before I put the post out. And it's just something where that affects promotion and that affects the show as a whole. And I have nothing against him trying to do something at church. He's a religious man, deeply religious, and that's fine. I mean, I'm not a big organized religion fan, but everyone, his own relationship with God is their own thing, and if he chooses to be more involved with that, that's 100% understandable. But you're on the show, but you're not going to promote the show. That's where I have a problem. That's where it's my decision to whether I want you here or not if you're not going to promote it. You're not just going to come in here and hang out and do whatever you want to do, and then leave, and then not be willing to be proud of the show that you're on. So he couldn't make it because we had to do a later episode anyway this week. It was going to end up being Friday. Got pushed to Saturday because I got caught up. Phil was busy Saturday. Ended up going over to his house that night. Haley and I did for some games, which was fun. We'll get to that a little bit later. But I was very upset, and I considered firing him, but now James stepped back at the same time, so Phil will be here, if for no other reason than right now we're in flux with the James situation. And we hope James comes back, but that's just kind of state of Three Dot as it stands now, is I wanted to fire Phil, couldn't fire Phil because James is leaving on his own regard there. So that's where we're at. Did see James last week. Him, Grace, Haley, and I went and did an escape room. It was the weekend of my birthday. And we did Trapped Toledo in, it's over by the distillery in Toledo. Key Street, I want to say? Sure. That was really fun. I had never done one before. I recommend it, especially if you've never done it. It's not anything crazy. I mean, it's Toledo. It's you're in a room. You got one of their quote-unquote actors there kind of either giving you hints or kind of trying to immerse you in the story. And we got there a little bit late. We solved it with like 5 minutes to spare. We were all excited. And when we found out, we picked the easiest one. We went on Instagram, because they'll post you on Instagram if you make it or if you don't make it. And there's like little kids who have completed it too. So that took a little bit of wind out of our sails, not going to lie. But it was still a fun experience. And then after that, we went to Sean's, because it's right there to eat. And then we stopped by the distillery because we were going to watch forget what game. I believe the Guardians were playing. So we wanted to watch the rest of that game, and didn't realize the distillery has like a second bar in the basement called a Geek Easy. Not Speakeasy, a Geek Easy. And you go in there and it's like pinball, arcade games. You can bring your own board games. There's a few different games of D&D going on, which was just kind of a cool concept. I think it's a great idea. And I'm not sure how long that's been going on. We might have been last to know about it, but just really cool, really interesting. People gave us some weird looks for being down there. It was like we didn't fit in, and we were getting bullied by people who have their own Geek Easy. So that was a kind of an interesting experience. But that overall was a fun night. And it's interesting that all these games are coming back, like Reset, this Geek Easy, like arcade style games are all becoming really big again. Okay, just an interesting observation there. Let's see here. That was it for that weekend. That was it for James. And also, this is going to be probably it's going to be a short episode because it's solo, but it's going to be a heavy Ohio State episode. So once we're done with all the 3-dot stuff and just kind of some other reviews I'm going to do, if you're not into sports, go ahead and turn it off because probably just going to do Ohio State for the whole second half. Haley wanted to watch Avatar 2. So we watched all of Avatar 1 and then all of Avatar 2 in 2 settings. Or 3, because we had to break up Avatar 2. But rewatching Avatar 1, very good. And I remember all the critiques of it being a basic story, but with great visuals. And that remains true, but still a good movie, I thought. I mean, I've never really heard anyone say they hate it that much. Avatar 2... The only issue I have is it was kind of just a rehashing of 1. I didn't like that they brought the same villain back. And I'm late on all this, but I don't care because I just watched it. But I didn't like that they brought the same Colonel back because they cloned him. It was just like, all right, we're literally doing the exact same story again, except now they're avatars as well. The water part was cool. The visuals were cool with that. But if you're doing a 3.5 hour movie, can we get a little bit more on what's actually happening? Because, like, the whales, well, you spend a lot of time on the Avatar whale things being connected with the sea people. And I wasn't keeping track of names. We were calling them seals, whales, and flying alligators were the terms we were using. But then the one whale was outcast, and you get like a brief scene about why. But like maybe it was just because it was so long we were like checking out. But good movie, but I don't know. At the end of that one, I don't know why the kid saved the Colonel. Don't know if we're going to just rehash and have the Colonel back again, because apparently they filmed all the movies at once for like the next 4, something like that. But, I mean, I'm sure we'll see it, because, I mean, it looked good. It's a good story. Why not run it back, I guess? But Avatar 1 and 2, still solid, still holds up. Not sure if I would consider it the best movie or worthy of the highest box office numbers ever, but in terms of a spectacle and a lot of work coming into something, I guess you hand it over, but that was a big chunk of our time the last week was watching those 2 movies. Let's see here. Also, over that Easter weekend, we went to Haley's dad, his girlfriend's house, and her mom, and we were playing Cards Against Humanity, which is a fun game, but if you've played it a few times, it's, it loses its luster. You know what the offensive cards are. You're not in shock. The whole point is shock value, and I get bothered because we're playing, and it quickly became, all right, we're just going to see, because her dad's girlfriend's mom was playing with us, and it quickly became them just trying to have her read the most offensive cards they could, which is funny in its own right, but I'm sitting there like, all right, I'm trying to win. I'm too competitive. I'm stupid with that shit. So I'm literally trying to, like, it doesn't make sense. These cards don't make sense. You're just, but that's what it quickly becomes. And when we played the same Fatal Field every day, and it's the same thing. I ended up just going off and ranting, basically making a manifesto of how to properly play Cards Against Humanity, which made me unfun, but I was having fun doing it. So, but I just don't love the game anymore just because I feel like you play it a few times and you lose all shock value, and then it's just almost boring. You know which cards are going to win. You know the best cards, and it's hard to go against them. But we also played a game. This is with Phil, Lauren, and Haley and I last night called Loaded Answers, I believe, which is a really fun game. If you're looking for a new board game, or not board game, but a new game to play, similar to Cards Against Humanity, because you can write whatever. Very fun game to check out. You read a very generic question, and then everyone has to write their own answer on a sheet of paper. And then the person who read the question tries to guess who gave what answer. And then the funniest answer also gets a point, or gets to draw a money card or whatever. And that one got more offensive than any Cards Against Humanity game I've ever played, because it was literally just write whatever you want. So that was good. That was a good time. And we also had, if I could give a shout out to Amy's Pizza Factory. Very good pizza. I had never had it before. I don't think they deliver. It's just carry out, but it's over by where Phil and I live. And that was very, very good. Highly recommend. If you go there, tell them 3 Dot sent you. You won't get a discount, and you won't get anything at all, but just do it. So that was all fun. We're going to transition slowly into sports here. Cliff Kingsbury to USC as an OC, I believe. Very interesting. I believe we talked about him on the podcast before in terms of him going to Thailand and never coming back. But I believe I said it on the show, but I always thought he will be back in some capacity. And, guys like that, they always get another shot, especially at the college level. And USC is already a wagon and coming to the Big Ten, so that'll be really interesting to see how Cliff Kingsbury recruits for them, because Lincoln Riley's already a killer when it comes to offensive recruiting, quarterbacks specifically. And now you got Kingsbury, who was a Kyler Murray guy and all of that. So that all gets tied in. Let's see here. I had Miami message boards on here, but that's not really relevant. Let me see. Before I get to my full Ohio State notes. Baseball gambling. That has been going on. That's a simple way to say it. But I've been doing a little bit of that. Working out a system so then I can start giving picks with the 3 Dot team. I'm going to make a group text with a few of the guys I know gamble that I've mentioned, with Brady, Murph, Jenico, etc. Because I don't know if Jenico does baseball, but I know Brady and Murph do here and there. So I'm going to work on that and maybe be doing some 3 Dot picks. So we will see how that goes. Transition into Ohio State. Your signal now to check out of the podcast if you are not an Ohio State fan. Aaron Nolan committed. We are late on the show, so this is the first news of that from 3 Dot. Aaron Nolan, I believe, was about to commit, or maybe he had just committed last episode. He's a 4-star quarterback out of Georgia, I want to say. And he's a lefty, which is interesting, but big get. Kind of interesting how Ohio State hadn't offered him at all. They had been kind of recruiting him, but Day likes to give actual offers in person, so Nolan had Ohio State on his list, was already getting ready to commit somewhere else. Jaden Davis went somewhere else, and another quarterback, Dylan Raiola, at the time, was an Ohio State commit. Now he's, just as an aside, Raiola went decommitted, believed to be committing somewhere else, and now he's already talks about committing somewhere else. It's interesting with college guys. You got to know if someone's actually in or not when you want to offer them. But Aaron Nolan always kind of had us around, always said he wanted to commit. At the time, we didn't really have a spot for him. Then a few things fell into place. Day gives him the offer about a week before his commitment date, and Nolan accepts it, and now he's our quarterback for 2024 class, which is huge. He's a 4-star guy, and it's really interesting because this entire class has been all over social media, and they all talk about how they're texting and FaceTiming other guys trying to really build this class themselves, let alone the coaches. And that's something that we used to see with Ohio State, especially on Twitter. I'm trying to think of who it was. like there's always one or two guys that are like captain of the class. They try to go get other guys. This seems to be a concerted effort by everybody. I mean, anytime someone commits, they say we got more coming. Anytime someone tweets about a school they like, we have our own recruits and commitments telling them to come to Ohio State instead. Really interesting to see, really fun to see as a fan. And as that stands right now, we have Aaron Noland, we have a couple. Well, we have Noland. I read through the class, but we have Noland. We have the two offensive linemen that are twins. We have two 5-star receivers committed. I believe one of them was since the last episode. Mylan Graham, 5-star. Jeremiah Smith, 5-star. Aaron Noland could end up being a 5-star by the time he's actually on campus. And then we also recently got a 4-star tight end, which I believe was yesterday during the spring game, and a 4-star linebacker to commit for the 2024 class. They also have a crystal ball for 2 corners. I believe both are from Ohio. One's from St. Ed's, I believe. I know Bryce West and Aaron Scott, I want to say. I hope I have those names correct. 2 highly ranked corners, which would be a huge get. I'm going to talk about the spring game and some of the young guys that played, but in terms of recruiting right now, this is a very, very good run and a really hot streak for Day and Ohio State as a whole. They have Justin Fry, as I've spoken about before, which is huge, but they also have James Laurinaitis back. He was an All-American at Ohio State, had a good professional career, and now he's recruiting for us. He was at Notre Dame last year as a grad assistant. He's back for us as a grad assistant, which will help 2 ways. One, he'll be coaching linebackers, which is take something off of Knowles, our defensive coordinator, where Jim Knowles can have someone he trusts to coach linebackers and kind of focus on the defense as a whole, rather than having to focus on a position group and the whole defense. And I'll talk about more of that in the spring game, because the whole defense looks a lot faster, a lot better, a lot more free, because we're not thinking as much. We've had a whole year with a new coordinator. And Laurinaitis is a great recruiter and a great just coach in general, a very intense guy, and I think that'll be great for the defense and linebackers especially. But what's interesting now is there's 2 to 3 tackles who are in the transfer portal, which just happened the other day. There's one from Texas A&M, a really big guy, and he's entered the portal, and that's one position where I know Ohio State will be aggressive with it. I don't know if they'll go after him for sure, but I wish I had a name off the top of my head. But the dude from A&M is the one I want more, and then there's another one. I just saw this too. Stand by. Let me see. I don't have it on my list. But there's 2 tackles who entered the portal where Ohio State will probably pursue them. And my guess, if I had to guess, I would say we get one. I highly doubt we would go after / get both. But if we can bring one tackle in with some experience, that'd be huge, because I also mentioned that in the spring game, the offensive line looked a little rough, which it's early, which is going to be a big theme of the spring game coverage. But the offensive line looked rough, which speaks, one, to the defensive line being improved, but also means the offensive line looked rough, which is not something you can really have at Ohio State, especially with a new quarterback. With all the weapons we have, we need to shore up the line, give our quarterback enough time to feel settled in. Not even about making long throws, giving him, 5, 6, 7 seconds back there, which you're never going to do consistently when you're playing top-level college ball. But you want him to feel protected. You don't want him to, every play, have to worry about pressure. You want him to just be able to step into his throws, not constantly worrying. I did bring up a tweet right here just because I was talking about Aaron Noland. Right now for 2024, we have Noland and around him 3 4-star offensive linemen, which is something Ohio State hasn't had in a while, is a deep recruiting class for linemen. That's Justin Fry influence right there. 2 5-star wide receivers. Brian Hartline continues to kill it. 1 4-star tight end I just talked about, and 1 4-star running back, and that's James Peoples out of Texas. I believe he's ranked number 5 in the country, which is a big get for Ohio State. Let's see here. Keeping all my stuff organized. Go back to my recruiting. And as always, I'll bring up the class and maybe predict another commit. But right now, defensive dudes, lineups. Okay, we're going to go into the spring game coverage, which I have notes on. Because I watched that. I was doing a bunch of yard work yesterday, which is Saturday, and took a break to watch the spring game, which I don't like the way Ohio State does it, where it's not really a game at all. It's offense versus defense in terms of the scoring. I don't like that. I like Andel. I get what you're trying to do and you want the defense to focus on certain things. But in terms of a fan, like if I just were a fan, I don't like seeing not an actual game happening. Like it's just a little bit interesting. It is just a glorified scrimmage. But if you're watching for certain things or if you're a big fan like I am, there is a lot to take away from it. Which, number one, biggest question the last 2 years, Denzel Burke at corner. He looked really good out there. And that comes with a couple, caveats. One, McCord looked rough. The other quarter, we didn't have Devin Brown. Devin Brown was out with a thumb injury. He's the other one competing for the starting quarterback spot. But McCord looked a little rough, a little shaky. And not all the top receivers were out there. But Burke was matched up on Marvin Harrison a fair amount and held his own. He looked pretty good. He had a few breakups. He was always tight on coverage. And he was a freshman All-American when he first got here. And that was with no defensive coordinator. I mean, we could say we had one, we didn't. Then last year, he's learning a new system, new philosophy with a whole new staff on the defensive side. Struggled a bit. And now this year is a big year for him to really take that next step that he should have been. A lot of the defensive guys had their development sidetracked because you lost every coach they were familiar with, or when they first got there wasn't a solid staff in place. So right now, a lot of guys may be taking a much bigger step than you're expecting, and I think it'll be good for the whole team. But Burke looked really good, which was the biggest question mark for me going in at corner, along with some of the young guys that I'll get to. Marvin Harrison continues to just be an animal. I mean, we all knew that, so that's not a surprise. I won't spend a lot of time on that. But it was interesting to hear them say that he's still the hardest worker. He gets there early. Carnell Tate was another one that was mentioned, the freshman receiver that I talked about last week. But the fact that Harrison is moving to the slot and is really fine-tuning the details of the game is something you love to see. Chip Trainum, I'm going to say Trainum. I know it may not be that. He is a linebacker. He was originally an Ohio State recruit as a linebacker. He committed to Arizona State. He may have been an athlete coming out of high school. But he committed as a linebacker, I believe, to Arizona State, I want to say. And then came to Ohio State last year as a transfer. He came to Ohio State as a linebacker. Then, I believe it was in the spring, flipped, and he was going to work out at running back. Or maybe it was halfway through the year when we had injuries, but it was early in the year. The guy is 235 pounds and the fastest guy on the team. He was returning kicks last year. He ran the ball against Michigan last year. He ran the ball against Georgia last year. This is a big X factor to have. Now, we didn't have Xavier Johnson. Henderson didn't really play. Dallin Hayden and Mayan Williams were both playing at running back yesterday, or Dallin Hayden primarily. The power this guy has, and now he has a full year and a half of training at running back. He can be a great goal line back, and he can hit a home run. He had a 60-yard run yesterday for a touchdown, and there was good blocking on it. It's a scrimmage, so there might have been a hold or two. Wasn't called. The defense, that was really the only big run they gave up. But the thing is he's so big, you don't expect him to get to the outside and explode like that, and he does consistently. I mean, he was running through guys, And then on that one, he just went untouched and 60 yards to the end zone. And he can fly. I mean, I truly think he can be an X factor with this second year under his belt, training full time as a running back. So I think that's really good to see. Just the fact that he looks natural out there. Another guy who on defense has been around for a while but will be taken a stride is Cody Simon at linebacker. He has so much speed. Steel Chambers is a former running back playing linebacker, kind of opposite of what Chip did. But Simon is as fast as him, and he flies around out there. Last year, he kind of fell into the shuffle, and we were running a lot of 4-2, which is 4 defensive linemen, 2 linebackers, and the linebackers were Tommy Eichenberg and Steel Chambers, who both were incredible. So it's not that one of them should have came off the field, but I think we might see more 3 linebacker sets this year in order to get Cody Simon on the field or get C.J. Hicks on the field, who I'll get to in a second. Because Simon looked great. And if you're rotating 3 guys, we kind of found out yesterday, we have the guys to do it. Gabe Powers led the team in tackles. He's a young dude. And it was interesting to see him, really in there on a ton of plays in the run game, and I believe he broke up a couple passes, as did Simon. 2 young guys on the defensive line that looked really good, or 3. I'll do 4. I'll throw them all in here. Hero Kanu. They called him Kanu. I've been saying Kanu. Hero Kanu. I'm going to say Kanu. He is a guy, he is huge at defensive tackle. Just a giant dude. He can plug up the middle. He is from Germany, so he probably, had a year or 2 of developing and catching up with the speed of the game, the size of the offensive lineman. He looked really good. He was all over the place, plugging up the run. I believe he got a sack as well. Caden Curry, same thing. He was a guy that chose us over Alabama and played sparingly last year. I think he could rotate in this year behind Tyleik Williams and Mike Hall. So that'll be awesome to see. The other one I was going to say is Omari Aber, one of those. 4-star guy from Texas. He didn't have any real flash plays. He might have gotten a sack at one point, but with the spring game, there's no contact, so it's just like 2-hand touch. So whether he gets him down or not, whatever. But he looked pretty good. He didn't look, as intimidating as Hero or Curry, but a lot of speed over there, and he was beating tackles a lot, which we'll get to the offensive line. But still something you want to see. You want to see that motor. And the biggest one was Kenyatta Jackson, who got a sack right before half, or maybe it was right after halftime. He's a 4-star guy. He was from Florida, I believe. And they've been talking, I've been listening to a podcast about Ohio State as they've gone through the spring, and they're talking about him having a lot of bend. Which, if you're a DN doing a speed rush to the outside of the tackle, you want to be able to bend and be almost, it's not possible for every guy, but try to get as close to parallel with the ground with your upper body as you can, bending at the hip to get underneath the tackle and around him. And they're saying Kenyatta Jackson can do that as good as anyone they've seen. Now, is he going to be as physical as like a Chase Young or a Bosa? That's huge praise. I'm not going to go that far. But if he has that speed rush, that opens the door for other moves. And if he can really work on that physical part of the game, that could be a game-changer defensive end. Maybe not this year, but going into next year. Because the starters are going to be JTT, who I know he hates that name, but Tui Tamaleo, whatever. JTT, Jack Sawyer on the edge, and Tyleik Williams and Mike Hall in the middle. But what I saw yesterday is we got some guys ready to rotate in, or at least give breathers here and there. And that's huge, having depth like that. Same with the linebackers, like I was saying. If we're doing 2 or 3 linebackers either way, if we have guys behind them, then it frees up being able to just play fast, sub on the fly, no drop-off. Going along with that, in the secondary, Denzel Burke will obviously be on one side. Davidson Igbunson. Again, these names for this year for Ohio State, a lot of trouble. But he's a transfer from Ole Miss. Really big corner. Big dude. Those two will probably be the starters, would be my guess. But you also have Ryan Turner, who had a few good plays yesterday. You have Jordan Hancock, who battled injuries last year. You're going to have, at safety, you got Proctor, who's been there forever. But they say he's been playing more under control. You got Lathan Ransom, who famously fell, but in the big game last year. But hey, chip on the shoulder, motivation, I'll take it. You got Kai Stokes, who showed in last year's spring game and early on. A lot of depth there as well, which is all things you want to see. And Jahad Carter is a transfer from Syracuse. He'll also be playing at safety. I don't believe he played at all yesterday. He recently was injured, and in the spring you want to be careful. You don't want to play anyone that's banged up at all. But in terms of that secondary, the coverage looked good all day. Even though there's a couple big plays given up that I'll talk about, the corners were all over receivers. If someone did catch the ball, they were typically tackled right away, which is what you want to see. There wasn't anyone flying open besides one or two plays. There wasn't a lot of confusion. Everyone seemed to be cohesive, which is the biggest thing in the spring. The D-line looks solid, like I said. O-line looked average. Kyle McCord, he looks good mechanically. And when he had time and he was set, he throws a good ball, but the accuracy wasn't quite there from what you would just dream, if you had a dream. Not what you wanted to see. But I went way back in Twitter, and Justin Fields, who is arguably one of the best quarterbacks besides Stroud that we've had at Ohio State, he only completed 4 passes in a spring game. And I was looking at tweets way back then, which was a lot of scrolling, but all those people back then said, oh shit, we wanted this guy to transfer in and he sucks. Send him back to Georgia, all that. He was getting a ton of hate. And it reminds me a little bit of what's going on now, because a lot of people are saying, McCord sucks. We need to upgrade a quarterback. Wish we saw Devin Brown. I wish we saw Devin Brown too, but I'm not willing to write McCord off because of a spring game. Without top receivers, with a shaky offensive line that's still learning how to play together, and with an improved defense. Why would we write off Kyle McCord this early? Stroud famously, his first couple games last year, he would always start first drive and underthrow a really easy one or overthrow a really easy one. It's nerves. It's whatever. It's his first real, hey, I'm the starter. Let the guy settle in. Let's not write him completely off based off a spring scrimmage. That's really all I have on McCord, because he did make a couple good throws, and he's our best shot. So why don't we try to rally behind him a little bit, and if it comes time to panic, we'll panic. But now is not that time, at least not in my eyes. Like I said, Chip at 235 had a 60-yard rushing touchdown. And along with McCord, I'm just going through notes here. The defense should win the spring game. If our offensive line isn't shored up, we've got a bunch of new starters, have 3 big spots. We have a new quarterback, and not every receiver or running back's playing. Plus, the defense has seen the offense play every day. The defense should win. They're a year improved with a coordinator. They have a bunch of good athletes. The defense should win a scrimmage, and McCord shouldn't necessarily be tearing it up. If McCord was tearing it up in his first real playing time, I'd have more worries about the defense. I'm not worried about the offense. If that would have happened, I would be worried about the defense. Going into some of the younger guys, Sonny Styles needs to play this year. I was on the fence just because this is a guy who was a freshman last year, skipped his senior year of high school. So there's development that has to happen, but he made plays last year when he was on the field, sparingly. He needs to be on the field. He's that good. He's that fast. He's that big. He can play, and he can play now. Ohio State traditionally has had a slight problem with letting older guys play over younger guys of loyalty or whatever. Can't happen this year. Sonny Styles is too good. CJ Hicks is too good. Now, Eichenberg and Chambers at linebacker is a different story than the secondary. But CJ Hicks is a 5-star kid. He was in the same class as Styles. He was flying around out there yesterday. He is fast. He was breaking up passes. He was all over the field. Hicks and Styles are two just dudes that can be game wreckers and disruptors. And I love to see both of them on the field a lot this year. Whether that's rotated in for like 60% of a game, or if it's them winning a starting job and they're only subbing out 20% of a game, or not at all, whatever it needs to be, they need to be on the field. And if nothing else, they need to get a ton of experience in order to have a huge third year. Styles look great. CJ Hicks looked great. Gabe Powers looked good, like I was already talking about him. A lot of the young linemen, a lot of the young secondary, a lot of good things from the young guys, which is what the spring game's for, is to see the younger guys play. Offensive line, I'm not going to say anything yet because it's early, bunch of new guys. We know Matt Jones, we know Donovan Jackson, both really good at the guards. 2 tackles on the center spot up for grabs with young guys and under-recruited guys. I think we get a transfer in. Maybe 2, but I think we get 1. So until that happens, I'm not going to make any judgments. But I was really happy with the defense. Offensive side, young guys. Jelani Thurman, a 4-star tight end. He is huge. I mean, we got Cade Stover at tight end. We're going to have G. Scott Jr. at tight end. Jelani Thurman will probably get some snaps. He's already big enough, which is a lot of the problem typically at tight end. He's going to have to put on some weight in order to block effectively in the Big Ten, but he's an athlete. He can run, he can catch. I wouldn't be surprised if he sees a little bit of time here and there. And I'd like to see a lot of these freshmen get time. It's a really talented class for the next 2 years. Which brings me to Carnell Tate, who had a big touchdown. I want to say it was a 20-yarder. They cannot say enough about him. Ryan Day, before the game, was asked who we should be watching in the spring game, and Carnell Tate was the first one out of his mouth. And that's big praise for a freshman wide receiver who was an early enrollee to be talked about like that by the head coach. Carnell Tate and Brandon Innes, who isn't on campus yet, are 2 wide receivers that might break in to the lineup at some point. But that room is so talented. Jaden Ballard is another guy who this year is going to take a big leap. He might take Fleming's spot because the wide receivers on paper now is Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Egbuka, and Julian Fleming, if you're just going based off last year. I think Fleming might lose out, and Ballard has so much speed that you can't keep him off the field. And I think it could be Harrison, Egbuka, and Ballard by the time either the season starts or rotating consistently with those 4. But it's also interesting because you watch the spring game and you got Caleb Brown out there. You have Kojo Antwi and Kyrion Graves. Those are 3 guys who are also 4 and 5 stars who no one even knows about because they got caught in between this Brandon Ennis, Carnell Tate side and Noah Rogers. The freshmen this year are Carnell Tate, Brandon Ennis, Noah Rogers, and there's another Rogers. They're definitely not both Noah Rogers. Forget his name. There's 2 Rogers, Tate, and Ennis. Then on the other side, you got the guys there, Harrison, Egbuka, Ballard, and Fleming. And in between, there's still 3, 4, and 5-star guys that haven't seen the field much. So this is the deepest room we've ever seen at Ohio State. Noah Rogers is another one I wanted to mention because he had let me see here, notes. I want to say it was a 59-yard touchdown catch where he caught it, ran, stiff-armed a guy, took it to the end zone. The playmakers are there. The line just has to hold, like I've been saying. And I think they're all young, where this year they'll start out shaky, and by the end of the year be very good, and next year be incredible. But it's just going to be going through those growing pains, and Ohio State fans are the worst at letting stuff happen. Like, people already want McCord out of there. They already want the line to go away. They want everything perfect all the time. And that's just not realistic, especially when you had such a good year last year. I think the line develops offensively, And I think this is a year where we're going to have to lean on the defense more. But I think that's okay because I think the defense is finally ready to be leaned upon. And Ohio State used to have elite defenses every year, and I think we're finally reaching that point to where we're going to have it again. I'm a big Knowles believer. I'm a big C.J. Hicks Styles guy. I'm a big Davison and big Igbunson guy. Big Chambers guy. All these guys. JTT, Sawyer. A lot of names on the defensive side where you can have confidence in them as opposed to last year where everyone's learning a new system. This year they know the system. They have the talent. They can fly around. If the offense isn't exactly what we've seen the last 2 years, which is absurd to expect every year, but it's what happens at Ohio State, defense can still win us games. And if we have that kind of balance where we can have an offense and defense, where one game the offense might blow them out, defense can hold them the next game, we can really take that next step. And I talked about last week, you got to move up in inches once you reach this level. I think we're there in terms of balance. That's about all I wanted to cover in terms of the spring game. I know it was a lot. If you're not an Ohio State fan, you're probably checked out way long ago. But that's what I care about, and that's something we're going to be doing as the season comes along. We'll still do the inside stuff with James and Phil and their development in terms of a 3-dot team. I'm going to build a website. We're still going to be doing gambling. Still all of the things of trying to be just a radio show. But when it's more of an Ohio State season, we're going to cover Ohio State in depth because that's the biggest thing that I care about. So with that, that'll be a wrap-up, I believe. Let me just check one more time. I always do this. It's also interesting. I'm much more comfortable doing a solo show when I know it's going to just be Ohio State. Because I can just go off the top of my head. I just had one-word notes for everything to mention. There's a couple tweets I want to mention. But alas, they are not here when I need them. Just like James and Phil. There's a Johnny Manziel, Merrill Hodge thing going around, but I'm going to wait to do that next week. Okay. I can't find any of the stats I wanted. Whatever. We're going to go ahead and end the show now then. This has been episode 22 of the 3-Dot Podcast. Special Sunday solo Buckeye podcast. We will see you next week. Thank you.